Good afternoon, and thank you very much for that welcome. I'd like to thank Mr. O and the management of TV Chosun for putting on this fine event and inviting me to speak here to all of you assembled. I was asked to speak on storytelling and to share some of my experiences in producing animation in conjunction with companies here in Korea. So I'd like to spend the next few minutes sharing a bit about storytelling, which is true across all genres of television and film. Of course, the bulk of my experience is in animation, kids programming, and family entertainment, but a good story is a good story across all media. To start out, I was asked to show a bit of the shows that I've been producing in recent years. For the past 4 years, I've been president of Fremantle Media Kids and Family Entertainment, producing and co-producing animation and live-action programming with producers, writers, directors, and other creators around the world. Some examples of those shows I'd like to show you now. All of the shows that you've just seen are made in different ways. Some are live action, some are 2D animation, some are CGI, but all of them have in common the same fact that we try and produce the best, most interesting and compelling stories, no matter what the show is. So the common thread of storytelling, as explained by Madeleine L'Engle, is where the artist has some kind of order, or he'll produce a small body of work. To create great work, to create great art, is hard work and requires a great deal of discipline and a great deal of order. Many people think that storytelling is more of a talent and an art than it is a refined skill, but it's also a craft and a trade. Great storytellers aren't naturally born for the most part, they're trained, and they're very disciplined at their art and craft. The importance of developing storytelling and writing skills as a whole can't be overemphasized. And investing in talent that wants to write and nurturing its development is the key to nurturing a new generation of storytellers here in Korea or anywhere else in the world for that matter. Ursula Le Guin said that there are great societies, she noted, that never had a wheel. But there are no societies that have not had storytelling. After all, history is storytelling, journalism is storytelling. The world exists through perceived stories among all people, and that's a common trait and characteristic of all societies around the world. It's also true that there's a great deal of diversity in cultures, and that every nation, regardless of their culture, has a storytelling tradition of some sort. Korea has a very rich and long history of storytelling, including the famous pansori performances, which were popular for hundreds of years in Korea. Korea's rich storytelling traditions have led to great historical dramas, which continue to this day, and films. So to create world-class TV and film productions that will travel around the world, the more diverse the scope of storytelling is, and the more trained and skilled it is, the more it will likely travel domestically and to countries around the planet. Robert McKee is a famous storytelling professor at the University of Southern California, has written many books on the subject, and he's pointed out that when you do enough research, the story almost writes itself. Lines of development spring loose, and you'll have choices galore. So the writing doesn't start when the pen goes on the page or the keystrokes hit the computer, but rather at the research stage, where a writer really delves into the story, the characters, and the world in which they live. Research, then, is crucial to good storytelling. Storytelling that begins with the writer understanding, knowing all of the characters that he intends to bring to life, and to know how to play out all of their roles. Storytellers often, when they're creating and writing their stories, they don't see or know where the story's going or how it'll end, and by the time they get to that ending, that's really, in many cases, just the beginning of rewriting the story to make the pieces fit together, to make it work, and to make it all make sense together. Sometimes, at the end of the process, one gets a story that doesn't quite work, but that story's never wasted, because often those stories come back in some way, shape, or form and provide an inspiration for other projects later. As everyone knows the world over, Steven Spielberg is the most successful filmmaker of our time. And he observed that people seem to have forgotten how to tell stories. Stories don't have a middle or end anymore. They usually have a beginning, and that never stops beginning. And that's a crucial point. It sounds simple, but stories, to be successful, need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and need to be able to entice the reader or the viewer to stay with it. Great stories are hard to find everywhere. They take a lot of skill, they take a lot of time. And when it comes to creating great stories, the world is a level playing field. Great writing can come from Korea, as well as the United States, as well as the UK and other countries around the world. But Korea is ideally situated to bring a new generation of storytellers to the world of entertainment. And from those great stories come great TV, great films, and great content for all media. Roger Schenck is a writer who said, in the end, all we have are stories and methods of finding and using those stories. And if you think about it, all that lasts through time are stories. Stories that are told, stories that are written in the histories and the traditions and the information that we pass down from generations in one form or another. So these stories are then taken to a filmmaker to translate a great story, or what hopefully is a great story, into a great film or program. Directors and producers are essential to this process and to translate those stories from the vision of the writer to the collective vision of the production team. The storytelling then and the creativity of all of them are reflected in the final product, in the final film, or in the final program. Korea excels with talented producers, directors, and other production talent that is more than capable of taking great stories and turning them into great films, great animations, great programs. Over the last 25 years, I've worked with a variety of studios and animation companies in Korea, all of whom do excellent work. This is a partial list and by no means an exhaustive one, but these are all companies that are world-class, that provide creative production facilities, have extraordinarily talented people within them, artists, production personnel, management, and they've all produced animation for shows from around the world that have traveled from one corner of the planet to the other. As I said, this isn't an exhaustive list, but it's a dozen of the top studios, and I'm honored to have Nelson Shin here, the founder of ACOM, sitting in the second row. and whose studio has worked for decades in animation.